Dear viewers, we're lucky to have with us now Dr. Gail Robertson, who is a euphonist, tubist, composer, arranger, band leader, organizer, low brass advocate, and much, much more. If you know her, and you should, it might be as Associate Professor of Tuba and Euphonium at the University of Central Arkansas, co-founder of Tuba Euphonium group Symbiosis Duo, past president of the International Tuba and Euphonium Association and International Women's Brass Conference, past chair and chief editor of the International Tuba and Euphonium Press, as a Wilson and Warburton performing artist, or maybe as a longtime performer with Walt Disney World's Tubafours, where she was musical supervisor and chief arranger and produced a highly acclaimed CD, Tubas Under the Boardwalk. Gail is a prolific commissioner, composer, and arranger, and most importantly for us today, she contributed a number of polkas to the tuba quartet repertoire. For those of you just joining us, I'm Nico Schrader. This is my brother, Lucas. Lucas, wave hello. We're members of the Bierkeller Boys tuba quartet, and we wanted to have Gail in to talk to her about her approach to arranging, her involvement with the polka community, and specifically her arrangement of Pennsylvania Polka, which is the lead single from our upcoming album, Dive In, out now on your favorite streaming platform. Gail, welcome. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. I understand that you not only arrange polka, but you also compose original songs. In fact, for I think the most interestingly named Octubafest I've ever heard of, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Toad Suck Bucks Oktubafest. Can you tell us about how you got so deeply involved with this event?
Well, when I moved to Arkansas, I wasn't burnt out, but I was trying to maybe segue away from not starting a tuba Christmas because I host one in Orlando. So I was thinking I would do something a different time of the year. And I went to a restaurant with one of my friends. They took me across the river to a place called Toad Suck Bucks. And it's sort of, it looks like it might have been someone's residence at one point turned into a restaurant. It's got outside, it's a really nice, a cool hang. I mean, there's a fire pit, and so I thought, well, I looked around, I thought, I wonder if he'd let my students come here and play someday. So I found the owner, Ken Buck, and his wife, Deb, and went up to him, and before I could even ask, he said yes. So then it started. It was my first, I think it was my second year I was teaching here at University of Central Arkansas, and we started the Toad Suck Bucks Oktubafest. And so then I thought, well, if we're going to play there, we need to have a new polka every year. So now it's very easy in Arkansas to find the name of a town or a small city that has an odd name or unusual. I don't want to make fun of someone's hometown, but the Toad Suck Buck name came from Toad Suck, Arkansas. And then there's the Pickles Gap. We have the Seed Tick polka that features Alphorn. We have the Turkey Scratch polka that's from Turkey Scratch, Arkansas, that has turkey calls in it. We've got the Possum Grape polka that hides a little bit of the heard it through grapevine. And we have the Flippin' polka from Flippin', Arkansas. So, I mean, the adventure goes on and on. Yeah, there's one called Goober. I haven't done the Goober polka yet. There's just so many that I haven't done yet. One of them is super dark because we had to put masks on with COVID and all that, so it's sort of happy. It sounds like Flipper, ba-da-da-dee-da-dee, and then all of a sudden it's like a heavy rock beat, and it's because we have to put masks on, and then the COVID goes away. So yeah, it's kind of, it will remind us forever, I guess, of the COVID experience. But so yeah, that's how it all started. So now every year I go out there to Ken Buck's place, and we do a new polka every year, and there's words to them that, it's hilarious. Stacy Baker wrote the lyrics for all the trios, and it makes me have to sing at the microphone, which is not my favorite thing to do, but we have a good time.
So you've assured that this is a long-running concert series because you've got all these names to work through now for your polkas. But it sounds like, I think, especially as a young tuba or euphonium player, it can be easy to get stuck in the concert hall as like the only environment. Not that that's a bad environment. So it sounds like you've really done a nice thing for the people participating in this Octubafest or your students. And I really think of Octubafest or as Oktoberfest in general as a great way to get outside of the concert hall. And I'm curious if that was on your mind as you stepped into this tradition, or if other folk traditions came to mind. Obviously, Arkansas is really rich with that, or if it was just Oktoberfest all the way.
Well, I'm a student of Harvey Phillips, so the king of Oktoberfest and all that, so we did all those things when I was there. He hauled us down to, downtown in Indianapolis, and we played at some big bar there where, the drinking rules were different back then. There a lot of beer drinking. My students, when we go to Toad Sucks, sometimes there's an alumni that might come and play with us. We just have a good time. It does get us out of the concert hall. We wear we have a t-shirt that looks like Lederhosen that's got like our logo on the front and everything. And so, and I have some hats we wear. But I have an Alphorn. We've done things with the Alphorn. We have a little tenor horn, that's in F, I believe, so we feature someone when they can't play the Alphorn. But it's just, we just have a good time. It gets students out, a lot of faculty, a lot of people from the community. I was told by the owner that there was quite a bit of a German area, some German folk that lived in this area of Arkansas too. So,
yeah.
I had heard there might be an opportunity to get some Toad Suck Bucks music in the Bierkeller Boys' hands here, but we might need to talk about a merchandise swap here too, so we can have some official Octubafest t-shirts here.
That would be great. Yeah, I saw you had all that. Yeah, I wear a Lederhosen myself, and a couple other students have worn it. But it's so hot. Like, it depends on when we do this concert. But this past year was great because it was later. Last year it was in late September. I thought I was going to pass out. so
We've done
hot. I mean, I wore knickers and stuff when I worked at Disney, so I'm used to wearing hot things in the sun. But man, yeah, it was like a long haul. We normally do 2 sets there, and I invite a faculty member to come up and conduct something. It's a good time.
We've done some heavy shows in the heat in Nebraska and in Missouri, but I don't know if that can compete with Florida outdoor performance weather.
Oh yeah, Florida was hot. I think Arkansas is hot in a different way. I don't know. It's hard to say which one was worse. I think I sweat more in Florida because of the humidity, but here you're still hot.
Yeah, all over. So maybe let's check into. I'm curious about this arrangement of Pennsylvania Polka, which we love. It sits on the horns really nicely, and it's nice to hear that you also put yourself on the microphone at the Octubafest since our group has started singing more and more as well. How did this Pennsylvania Polka arrangement come together? Why the Pennsylvania Polka, and what led you to it?
Well, believe it or not, I can't remember where I was, but I was on a bus trip somewhere with some band students. I'm guessing it might have been on the road when I was in Czech Republic, believe it or not. And I had brought along like a piano book of polkas just to try to have something to do while I was on the trip. And I thought, well, I'll just write a couple polkas. And I did the Pennsylvania polka and I did Liechtensteiner polka, I believe. Those are the 2 I did on that trip. And, they're not, I tried to write, when I worked at Disney, I wrote stuff that was custom for the Tubafours, which meant you could write super high for, Willie Clark on the first tuba. I'd write my own parts, whatever, technical things, whatever. And I knew I had a really great groove and bass player who was playing the bottom, Pat Glenn, and then Carmen Russo would do anything. So what I was trying to do is try to write stuff that was more universal, that would be for more people to play. So it's not a really hard chart. I've done it with, we do it obviously with my ensemble's got, 24, 25 people in it. So it works good with either a quartet or, that's funny, y'all drink at the same time, or to have a big ensemble works great too. So they're not what I would say like super fancy or anything, a lot of crazy modulations. It just really works. And if people are going to sing and dance to it, then it doesn't throw them and trip them off either because of weird, 3/4 bar in the middle of it or something strange.
I think this is a great point you bring up, and we think about this a lot, and we love playing this chart because I like to torture the group because I know the players. So when I'm doing arrangements, I know Lucas is playing F tuba, so we can go quite high, and I like to give myself accordion transcriptions or trumpet transcriptions just so I have fun material to practice. But then you get into the 3-hour show at Toad Suck Buck or elsewhere, and suddenly having that chart that sits really nicely, it's not too high, can be really nice. And I think too, there's also this trade-off, like in the folk tradition, playability is really nice in terms of participation, and if you have community members coming out to play, but it can also be a very virtuosic thing. And I'm curious how you balance this, especially when you're writing original polkas, or when you're thinking about arranging, in terms of preserving the chart and the spirit of the chart, instrumental concerns, but then also some sort of creativity yourself or virtuosity for the players.
Well, I mean, obviously, if you're writing an arrangement, then you have more rules. You're more stuck, and so I believe in giving everybody something interesting, having the melody in everybody's part at some point. Like for instance, even though it's just whole notes, but ding, 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 ding is in the second euphonium. Because so many times, I just remember hearing even some of the professional quartets, and there's two great euphonium players, and you're always only hearing that one. And I was a tuba player for some point in my life too, so I'm like, nah, I don't want to be playing off beats the whole time either. So I think in my writing, if I'm doing, especially if it's a composition, and maybe I might be able to do it with the arrangements, is the first tuba chord sort of has the role of what the euphonium does in the band. It's sort of the roving person that might play some off beats, might double the octaves, the bass, and it might have some melody or counterline. So I think that you can be the most creative in that voice. So I think that's kind of where I am. If I'm composing something, I don't know, it doesn't have to be, there's no rules, but I still have that sort of predictable style. But I always try to throw a twist, if anyone knows my stuff, there's always what we call the secret ingredient, and on one of those polkas, it takes the bass line from the Cinderella's tune and alters it. Instead of da 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 dee da 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 dee da da, it's like dee da 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 dee da dee da. Actually, it's not that predictable. I can't remember what the bass line is, but it's dee da 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 dee or something weird. And then so if you know that tune from the Disney side of me, you're like kind of like, am I hearing Cinderella? And then the flippin' polka has that ba da da dee da yada 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 da da, but that's Flipper from the old TV show, but it's da 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 dee da dee da. So it's not quite there, but I don't know. I just think it's fun to have humor in it. Anything we do is going to be fun outside, and I don't know. My students know me as Dr. Robertson, and they only see sort of the academic side of me. I go out there and I can let my hair down a little bit and just be a little bit of a goof. The Disney side comes back a little bit, but I don't know. I think when you're writing pieces for, keeping the integrity of what the polka would be, the form, it's going to have a nice introduction or something that's going to come back. It's sort of not a rondo form, but it's going to come back again.
Yeah, and I have to say we're very thankful. Julia isn't here for this interview, our second euphoniumist, but we're very thankful. She plays great, and so many. If you get the stock charts, it's just upbeats or little counter melodies. So I also really think passing it around is a beautiful thing. I have to say though,
he just calls me the viola player because tuba one, sitting in between for the string quartet, but that's okay. I like euphonium for the wind band
player,
reference better. Viola.
Yeah, cello. I find first tuba challenging. I think it's such an important voice to me to glue together the euphonium and the tuba sound, and we're lucky to have Lucas playing, and on F tuba especially, it sort of creates this blend. But then suddenly the range comes into question. If I'm distributing this chart, you might not have a bass tuba player, you might have a lower tuba, and then suddenly things are upside down. And the Pennsylvania is a great example where this works because the range isn't too challenging. It sort of sits nicely on any tuba. But I think that can, for me as an arranger, that can be a sticking point for sure.
Well, out at Disney, I know that because I had, they were both playing the big, the contrabass tubas, or two C tubas. It was easy to kind of switch because you had the same color. But if you do have a group that has an F tuba and then you have a C or a B flat bass in it, then when you switch and you put that bottom part on the F tuba, it's not going to have the same color. So I've learned, not to always switch, because even in my university ensemble, the first tuba loft is on the E flat tuba or on F tuba. And so if I do any fancy moving around, then the second bottom tuba is going to be maybe too high for some of those players that might be younger. So I've kind of gotten into a little bit of template when I do these ones for, like, this is going to be what I would say for everybody to play versus a professional quartet. If I was writing something for your group, I could probably write whatever we wanted. But if you want people to buy it and you want people to play it, it's got to be something that's accessible.
Yeah, some flexibility there. Yeah, there's been some arrangements Nico's done specifically for us where we've done switching between the bass and contrabass tuba, but it's an intentional effect with the color where, if I'm playing the oomps and Matt's now playing the pause, it just sounds a whole lot brassier because I'm way down below the staff on the F tuba, which can be a cool effect. But if you have some middle schoolers or earlier high schoolers playing, maybe you want to be a little more careful about that.
Yes. But
Totally.
not everybody can sound beautiful on the F tuba and the low register, as we probably know, right?
Sometimes that's nice though to get the
It
ugly oompa in.
depends how
Yeah.
many beers you've put in me beforehand. Yeah.
That also plays a role. Um, maybe one more serious question for you, Gail. I'm curious, and especially since you're teaching, you play a role as a mentor for so many young performers. So if we have people listening who are younger players, they're interested in maybe this sort of music or getting outside of the concert hall, or maybe trying some arranging for a group they're playing with. What is the best advice you could offer them as they start to approach these sorts of things?
Well, I tell anyone that's wanting to start arranging to find something, hopefully something public domain, and maybe you might look at it visually and look at maybe a score or something. Typically, I just transcribe by ear. I feel like I'm more creative when I'm pulling things rather than seeing it. But when someone's starting out, and I tell them not to do more than 8 measures, maybe 8 or 12 bars of it, bring it in and let somebody play it. Because a lot of times when people are doing their first arrangement, they're also doing their first time ever on a notation software. So then there's that frustration plus this, and then you might not save it. So that way, if they spend, like let's say an hour on 8 measures or whatever it is, if it doesn't work, they're not going to say, "Oh, heck with this," because they spent 20 hours on an entire work that just doesn't work. So number one is, to not spend too much time. Try it out what you have and make sure that it's going to work. My biggest rule of thumb is how to make the tuba parts work. Is I like them to be at least an octave away from each other, unless I want evil deaf chords. Then you can put, and I normally
grind.
go over to the piano and I show thirds, like where middle C is, and then I do down where the tuba range is, and you play a C and an E. And if you can't hear it, but you play the low C, and then you jump up to the E up here, and you can hear the clarity. I remember whenever I had my quartet from Disney, we were playing in Indiana. We were guest artists at IU with Harvey Phillips when he was still living, and he was just saying how he loved the arrangements because you could really hear all 4 voices. It wasn't like the 1 tuba part where you just couldn't tell what it was doing. So, and I think the secret is the octaves in the, at least an octave away from each other. And if you're going to do fifths, maybe, B flat in the staff, to the F in the staff and bass clef. But if you do that down below, it's got to be evil or death chord, I say.
There's a time and a place.
It's nice that you
My
don't.
octaves all the time. I use my octaves as sort of like they would the pedals, and if you're at church and you hear something really cool, and then when the really final verse comes, the very last time through is when you hear more pedal, more feet happening. So I like my feet, so to speak, or the pedal to be something that's a color that's used here and there, not the whole time. So my students, they always laugh whenever I have a Euphonium rehearsal, and the first time someone takes something down or up an octave that's normally a new person, I always cut them off and say, please don't insult me. I'm very familiar with the ranges of the instruments. You don't have to show me that the tuba can play that note,
It's nice that you don't forbid these textures, but rather reserve them for the right
Well,
ugly death
you have
time.
4 like instruments pretty much. What can you do to make it sound more interesting later on? And so if you just got to have different colors, different roles that they would play. I mean, it's funny. I'm doing a lot of composition for these charts for my students that are for like a play along track, like where I have a MIDI, an actual sound, like a disc of the pieces you'll play along with. And I write in such a different way than when I'm composing like for Tubafours quartet or things like that, where you start with a melody and you start with all the things that you want to go, and then you kind of fill in the bass line and then the inside parts. That's how I write. But with my tracks, I'm working on some funk piece now called Funk Centric for Steph Fry to record. That one I start with sort of the mood. I have the drum and the bass, sort of the track going on. And then I write my melodies after that. It's very different. But, in the end, I just think keeping things interesting. Don't always feature, the euphoniums. Give them a break. The challenge of featuring the tuba is how to get the other people out of the way. Don't be afraid to give people rest. So when I'm featuring the bass line and the tuba, the euphoniums might have something super soft, but not high to get out of the way, because otherwise they can't play that soft. But sometimes you don't even have the bottom bass line part happening when the tuba has a melody if it's a low melody, because why have the bass line there if you can follow that way. So I know I'm trying to think a couple things. I know I did You've Got a Friend in Me from Disney had a bass was featured, and I think everybody wants to be a cat. You know, from like the Aristocats, those were some where I featured the bottom tuba, and you know, it takes more of a challenge to do that.
And I have to say, going into hour 3 on the bandstand, rests are greatly appreciated, even as a chance to grab a sip of beer.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, if you had to only drink one beer for the rest of your life and one beer only, which beer would that be?
Well, it'd either be root beer or ginger beer because somehow or another, sadly, I have developed an allergy to alcohol. And you know, when I was a drinker, I didn't care what beer I drank. It always had to have a fish or a cat or a kayak or canoe or something. It was always about the label. But I don't know, I would say about 15 years ago, maybe a little less than that. I just little by little, I just felt like I would get sick, my face would break out. So now it's ginger beer or root beer.
And it was
I like
probably
that.
easier up in Michigan to find beer with kayaks and everything when you were up here, huh?
Michigan had, think that was the very peak of when I was realizing I was allergic to it, was when I was there, when I was a
Okay.
doctoral student. Not that I've ever been a big drinker, but I think the alcohol content in the beers there is what really, really made me realize I had a problem. Someone told me I should drink this beer called Hop Slam. You know, and normally that beer comes in a snifter, you know, the little
Right.
tiny thing. And
Yeah.
we were at this place, it was with the trombone studio, I think with Ava Ordman, and it was a new waitress that night. And when I ordered this Hop Slam beer, it came in not the regular pint glass, but the tall pint glass, that's whatever that is. And I'm just thinking, so I drank it. Well, I think it had like 9% alcohol. I don't know. Well, I know I went home, I made it home, everything was fine, everything. But the next day when I woke up, my throat hurt so bad. I must have like slept weird and I must have snored and I couldn't breathe. My throat felt raw because, you know,
That's one
and
way
I
to find
remember waking
out.
up and my heart was just beating like bang, 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 bang. And I just thought, nah, I don't know about Hop Slam. But I found out later you're only supposed to have a snifter of it. Not a huge, big,
Not the
giant thing.
leader. Yeah, no
Yeah.
kidding.
That'll do it to you. Well, Gail, thank you so much for joining us. Once again, this is Dr. Gail Robertson, euphonist, tubist, composer, arranger, band leader, organizer, low brass advocate. And you can find her arrangement of Pennsylvania Polka performed by us, the Bierkeller Boys, Oompa Band, on any streaming platform, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, you name it. They have it. Gail, if people want to find your sheet music, maybe the Pennsylvania Polka or one of the many arrangements you've done, or
Ooh,
excuse
hit me
me,
up.
or maybe the recordings of you or Symbiosis Duo or something like this, where should they find you on the internet?
Well, the arrangements, my main publisher is the Cimarron Press. He's taken over the Tuba Euphonium Press back in the day. So you'll find the majority of my stuff there. There are a few things that Adam Fry publishes, but most of it's all with Cimarron Press. So whether it's arrangements or compositions, and you know, I've done things for quartets, big ensembles, euphonium choirs, tuba euphonium, you know, duets, whatever, stuff with a lot of fixed media. As far as recordings and stuff, you know, we had a website. Stacy Baker and I had a Symbiosis Duo website, but I just got so sick of trying to manage that, Facebook, this, that, and the other. So now I guess if someone wants to buy those discs, they're going to probably have to contact me, sadly. And I guess maybe I need to do something about that. We need to make sure that's available somewhere. So.
But I can say, not hard to get a hold of, and great to chat with. Thank you again so much for joining us. The Bierkeller Boys full-length record, Dive In, with the Pennsylvania Polka, arranged by Dr. Gail Robertson, comes out on May 1st, 2023. Please check it out. You can find Gail's music at Cimarron Press and euphonium.com. Thanks again, Gail. It's been really wonderful.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here.